Hello, welcome to 5 Questions with LeRoy Butler, and we're here with 2 weeks to go in the regular season, and I don't know if it was preordained, but the Detroit Lions lose and give the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers a wide open door into the playoffs, or, you know, with a chance to go into the playoffs. You surprised?
Actually, no.
Yeah.
But if you look at the whole scope of the NFC North, you would think they're the only team, Tom, that has an elite quarterback, that they should be running away with this division. They have the best receiver.
You're talking about when Rodgers and Cutler are playing.
Yeah, Rodgers and Cutler's not playing.
Right.
They should be taking over this division. Now, Cutler's come back, but, you know, Rodgers is still out, and the Packers have a chance. So you got to feel like the Dallas game, knowing that it's a must-win. So it just seemed to work out for the Packers for some reason.
They now control their own destiny. Win their last two, and they're in the playoffs. That's all you can ask for in this situation. Now, the whole thing shifts back to, is Aaron Rodgers going to play again this week? And, you know, I think there's some misconception, and maybe we can address it a little bit.
Clear this up for me.
Well, you know this as well as anybody, because you've been, you know, had a relationship with injuries and Dr. McKenzie. But the misconception is that McCarthy is making the call on whether Rodgers plays or not.
Right.
I think he wants Rodgers to play. He wanted him to play last week, don't you?
I think Aaron Rodgers, it's just a couple conversations that goes on that fans may not even know. That McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers wants him to play.
Right.
But there's one guy that has to protect players from themselves. That's Dr. McKenzie. He always errs on the side of caution. Because if for some reason you're not 100% and you're tried it out there, it can be some consequences. So, and doctors, they don't really care about the wins or losses. They look at a bone scan or an X-ray. Take the name away for a minute.
Well, they're
just,
not
they want
supposed
to look at
to. Yeah, some doctors will give in to that.
They will.
But McKenzie doesn't.
No, McKenzie doesn't, because he has to think about the player first. You got to be 100%, and nobody's really 100%. I'm not saying that. Oh, everybody's kind of banged up. When we're talking about an injury of this nature, rushing it sometimes can be wrong. But some people probably think McCarthy doesn't want him to play or stuff like that.
Or is playing games with it. I don't think so. I think they went through the week. They had hopes that Rodgers would play. They thought his practice performance would influence McKenzie. It didn't. I think there's another element to this that people forget is that Ted Thompson and McKenzie's job is to look at the big picture, long-term future. They just gave Aaron Rodgers $110 million if he finishes out his contract. So that's an investment in someone. Do you want to risk, you know, ruining your biggest investment in your whole thing? And I think that's the question that they go to. Absolutely,
because I thought McCarthy was very clear. It was in the organization's best interest that he not play. And it was just, was it strictly medical, or what was the reasoning behind it? And he didn't want to get into that because he still got to get Matt Flynn ready to play.
Yeah, and he was frustrated. I think he had just come from a meeting where they had told him, you can't play, your best player can't play. So, you know.
I know deep down inside McCarthy knows that the media just wasn't going to accept that. But at the same time,
he's the face of the franchise, and he has to take it.
Absolutely.
He has to be the guy.
And I think you felt like going into Dallas that you can probably win without Aaron, but I think Pittsburgh was more realistic. But I think Chicago may be more realistic. Maybe Flynn could play against Pittsburgh, and Aaron can play, even for the momentum to get into the playoffs.
Right, except you would want, I think going into that Chicago game, you would want him to have played some, you know, to get some of the rust off. We'll see. I mean, your guess, percentage that Rodgers plays this week?
I say he doesn't play this week. He comes back for Chicago.
Okay.
I would want him to be 110% rather than going out there and have any kind of pain, because I've had shoulder problems. And when you fall on it again, it's going to hurt. This time it may break.
And here's the thing that they're also weighing is that Chicago's playing at Philadelphia. That's not an easy game. If the Packers lose and the Bears lose, then it still comes down to that last game.
Absolutely. And that's the one I really want Aaron Rodgers for.
Right. So we'll see how that goes. I guess we'll know on Wednesday whether he's going to play or not. So let's talk about Dallas a little bit before we look ahead. was that unbelievable? All the games you lost down there.
Right.
You know, you must have thought to yourself, this is just a repeat at halftime.
Yep.
Were you having flashbacks of Troy Aikman hitting Jay Novacek down the middle?
No. Jason Garrett. Remember him?
Jason Garrett.
I looked at the television. I turned my living room turned into church. I want to thank you, Ted Thompson, Mike McCarthy, Sam Shields, because I tweeted they did something we could never do.
Yeah.
Go down to Dallas and beat Dallas. So that was one of the biggest things I saw of all time. Now, in Packer history, since I've been around over 20-something years, to come back the way they did. Now, a lot of people say it was a collapse of Dallas or the Packers fighting back. I think it was a combination of both, but you did it without Aaron Rodgers, and you did it with a tight end, Andrew Quarles. Some people thought Ted should have gave up on.
Right.
And if you look at, Boykin out there receiving, a lot of people 3 years didn't even know. Mm-hmm. And you look at some of the younger guys who were flying around out there, and then one guy, Sam Shields, undrafted free agent. That's all Ted Thompson. I mean, it was just a great time.
Let's talk about what they've done here and what they did in Dallas. And I think Capers changed his philosophy a little, which was to take Tremont out of the slot and put him outside. So he's got his two best guys at their two best positions, Shields and Tremont Williams. And he didn't care where Des Bryant lined up. Des Bryant was either going to be on Shields or he was going to be on Tremont, and he was going to roll with
two experienced guys on him.
And ultimately it paid off. Those two guys played a pretty darn good game.
Yeah, another thing, again, Don Capers may get bad raps at times. Defense didn't play great the first half, but something he did to me that made me feel like the innovativeness of him and Dick LeBeau and all these guys, the architect of this defense. Real quick, put Matthews on the inside, and he run a double cross with Hawk and take out Brad Jones. Then you put in Dayton Jones, your defensive end, Mike Daniels, and you move Mike Neal from defensive linebacker back down to defensive end.
Right.
That's your best pass rush group.
So you have Perry, Matthews, and Neal along with Mike Daniels and then Dayton Jones.
I really liked it. You get smaller, but you're faster, and you get after the quarterback.
Right.
And I think that play, and we're talking, please stay tuned for X and the O's, because something Tom talked about is if you saw Jason Garrett's press conference, he talked about them having this play called smoke.
Yeah.
The way it's a run-pass option. And Tony Romo, I don't know why he would say that his quarterback chose to do that. You got to protect your quarterback. McCarthy would never do that. He would never sell his guy out like that.
I think Romo eventually talked about it anyways. But I get your point. I get your point. Yeah. So I think that was a key factor. Out of this whole thing, if there's a savior, in this team, you can say Matt Flynn, you can say, Jordy Nelson made some great plays, but it all comes down to Eddie Lacy. This guy is the reason why they're actually in the playoffs, isn't he?
This is the reason why I thought it was brilliant by McCarthy, 26-3 at halftime. Guess what? When we come back, we're going to run the ball regardless.
Yeah.
And I even tweeted it out. Just run it regardless, because sooner or later that Dallas defense, the stripes are going to show. Long run, I think 40, 50 yards. Then they come back. No one wants to tackle Eddie Lacy.
Yeah.
Then he comes back, McCarthy, which was brilliant, and throw a screen pass to Starks with fresh legs.
Yeah.
Now they got Dallas on the heels. Now they were able to throw the ball at will. And I really like the formation. We talked about the X and the O's last year. Almost like the wishbone.
The full house backfield.
Because you can't see which side is the strong or the weak side.
Right. I thought he came out with that game plan. I thought they were nuts. I was like, so you're going to just,
just run
go
it.
run,
weakness,
power, you're going to go.
Their weakness.
And
weakness.
Interestingly, he said what they did was they started the game over. They went back to what their top 10, 15 plays were and just started running those. And lo and behold, it worked for them. So, you can, there are a lot of things you can rip McCarthy about, but his guts in the second half of going with that game plan was pretty big, right?
I think for the most part, McCarthy out-coached Garrett. I think he put his players in position to win. They got a no-quit attitude. And again, they did something that not a lot of teams can do. And normally Dallas always collapses in December and January. But you got to be there to pick the pieces up and make it work. 4 consecutive drives with touchdowns, not field goals, touchdowns. And I think that says a lot about the magnitude of your team and the character of your team.
Right. Now, what's the factor here going into this game against Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it's a dig pin. That's what I'm thinking. You really drop that in the end zone?
Yeah, right.
Pittsburgh, that's why I need the same thing this week.
But you're coming off a game hugely emotional. You've just done the impossible.
Yep.
What are the odds of a letdown, and how do you handle a team like Pittsburgh?
This is how you handle it with a letdown. You control your own destiny. There's no letdown. Now, if it was a possibility that you didn't have to control your destiny, it can possibly happen with a team, under Ben Roethlisberger, Super Bowl winner, but you beat him in 2010 in the Super Bowl. So you have them on film beating them. Todd Haley's offense like to spread it around a little bit. Stay tuned for X and O's. We're going to talk about some of the plays they run. But you're playing at home. And it'll be 20 years since the Lambeau Leap, okay? So
way to get that plug in.
Oh,
okay.
well, of course. They will be fired up.
Okay.
And they would not let this slip by. But this is a must-win.
I will tell you, Pittsburgh is coming in here saying, okay, you beat
us
in the Super Bowl. Yep. We're going to knock you out of the playoffs, and we're going to keep our playoff slim, but to none playoff hopes alive. So it could wind up being a pretty interesting game.
I think it may be the game of the day. But again, if Aaron Rodgers plays, it'll be very interesting.
Right.
But the emotions of how they're riding now, I like to save Aaron for Chicago and let Matt Flynn's moxie take this team and catapult them into the playoffs.
Okay. Well, we will see. Yeah. So we will see you next week after the Pittsburgh game, and do stay tuned for X's and O's. We've got a look at the Cowboy game and looking ahead to the Pittsburgh game.